Okay, think about this for a second. The most vulnerable people imaginable, tiny infants. Now picture someone, a woman in Victorian England, who might have, well, murdered hundreds of them, systematically.
It sounds like something out of a nightmare, doesn't it? But it's a true story. Today, we're really digging into the life, the crimes of Amelia Dyer, sometimes called the Ogress of Reading.
Yeah, and our aim here in this deep dive is to try and unpack what happened. We want to look at her background, what might have possibly motivated her.
And crucially, her mindset. What was going on inside her head that allowed her to do these just horrific things over and over again? We'll be using historical accounts, trying to piece it together.
And you really can't understand Dyer without understanding the world she operated in, this whole grim phenomenon of baby farming in Victorian times.
Exactly. It wasn't just her, it was a symptom of the times, really.
For unmarried mothers back then, I mean, the situation was brutal.
Oh, absolutely. Just overwhelming social stigma, shame, often complete financial disaster. There were basically no safety nets, no real support. It left women incredibly desperate.
And then there was the Poor Law Amendment Act, 1834. That made things even worse, didn't it?
It really did. It put almost all the legal and financial responsibility squarely on the mother, just closed off options, pushed women into these impossible situations.
So this harsh reality, it basically created an opening for people like Dyer. A dark market, you could say.
Yeah, for these so-called baby farmers. They'd advertise, often quite deceptively, offering to care for infants, for a fee, of course.
And that fee could vary quite a bit, right? Like £5, maybe up to £80.
That's right, a significant sum back then. And while maybe, just maybe, some intended to provide care, many, like Dyer, saw it purely as a business opportunity, exploiting desperation for profit.
Her ads could sound so respectable. Something like, married couple with no family would adopt healthy child, nice country home, terms, £10.
Exactly. Offering this picture of hope, a safe haven, making mothers believe their child would be okay, maybe even have a better life.
But behind that facade, something truly terrible was happening.
So Amelia Dyer, she was born around 1837, maybe 1839, and she actually trained as a nurse initially.
Which is ironic, given what she became known for. But that nursing background must have given her a sort of credibility.
Definitely. It made her seem capable, trustworthy, and it probably also, exposed her to how common infant death was back then, which might have factored into her early methods.
Right, let's talk about those methods. It seems early on it wasn't necessarily active murder, but more like neglect.
Yes, that seems likely. Perhaps using things readily available like laudanum Godfrey's cordial was a common one, basically opium solutions given to babies to keep them quiet, keep them manageable.
So the goal was maybe just to spend as little as possible, let the infants fade away, and then blame it on the high infant mortality rates of the time.
Probably. Minimize cost, maximize intake. But then there's this shift, isn't there? Towards active murder.
Why? Why change the method?
Well, several potential reasons. Efficiency is likely a big one. Waiting for neglect to take its course is slow. Active murder meant she could process, so to speak, more infants faster.
Which meant more fees, more money, quicker.
Exactly. And paradoxically, it might have felt safer to her in some ways.
Safer? How so?
Well, with neglect, if babies died too often or too quickly at one address, it might eventually raise suspicion. Doctors might get involved, death certificates needed.
Okay. So by actively killing them and disposing the bodies secretly.
She bypassed all that. No official record, less chance of immediate inquiry tied directly to her.
And her method became quite specific, didn't it? That white dressmaking tape?
Yes. Strangulation with white tape, usually tied with a very distinctive double knot. A deliberate, hands-on method.
And disposal.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, maybe burials, but later.
Later, famously, dumping the bodies in rivers. The Thames, primarily, sometimes weighed down trying to keep them hidden.
And all the while, she was constantly changing her name, moving house.
Mm-hmm. Multiple aliases, frequent moves. It made her incredibly hard to track. Made it difficult to connect the dots if bodies were found in different places.
She must have seemed so ordinary, though, to the mothers.
That was key to her success, wasn't it? She cultivated this image, respectable, matronly, kind, reassuring, just what a desperate mother would want to see.
But it was all an act. The moment the money changed hands.
Her interest evaporated. The transactions were apparently very quick, very businesslike, no real concern shown for the mother or, tragically, the infant.
Just commodities. It's chilling.
Utterly.
Yeah.
Any contact after she took the baby was likely just more deception. lulling the mother, preventing questions, keeping the operation running smoothly.
So motive. It comes
Yeah.
down to money, doesn't it, primarily?
It really seems that way. Financial gain appears to be the absolute core driver.
Hmm.
But the sheer scale, the repetition over decades, it points to something deeper, a profound detachment.
Like a complete lack of empathy. What we might now label as psychopathy or sociopathy.
It certainly aligns with those kinds of traits. No guilt, no remorse, treating human lives, infant lives, as objects. And she was clearly very skilled at lying, at manipulating people to get what she wanted.
And it wasn't just a one-off or a short spree. This went on for years and years.
Decades, potentially. That methodical, almost assembly line approach to murder really suggests a deeply ingrained pathological mindset.
It wasn't about sadistic pleasure, necessarily.
There's no real evidence of that. It seems much more like a cold, calculated business decision. Murder as the most efficient way to profit.
She'd had brushes with the law before, though, hadn't she? But always seemed to get away with it or get lighter sentences.
Yes, there were periods of suspicion, even a short jail terms for neglect, I believe. But she always managed to resume her activities until 1896.
March 1896. The discovery in the Thames.
That's right. A bargeman pulls a carpet bag from the river. Inside, the body of an infant, Helena Fry.
And the crucial clue. The wrapping paper.
Yes, a label, partly obscured, but traceable to Temple Meade's station in Bristol. And crucially, an address linked to one of Dyer's known aliases. That little piece of paper broke the case open.
So the police investigation kicks into high gear, Detective Constable James Anderson leading it.
So they put her under surveillance. They even used a decoy, didn't they? A young woman pretending she needed to place her child.
Clever. To get more evidence directly linking her.
Exactly. And when they finally raided her home, the findings must have been horrifying.
Letters from mothers, pawn tickets for baby clothes, telegrams setting up the handovers.
And spools of that white tape. Plus, investigators noted the smell. The unmistakable smell of decomposition in the house.
Just awful. And then they started searching the rivers more thoroughly.
Yes, dredging operations. More bodies started turning up, more infants strangled with the same white tape. The pattern was undeniable.
She was eventually tried specifically for the murder of one infant, Doris Marmon.
That's correct. The evidence for that specific case was particularly strong. Her defense tried an insanity plea.
But it didn't work.
No, she was found guilty. Hanged at Newgate Prison, June 10th, 1896.
And her last words were reportedly just, "I have nothing to say."
Chillingly brief. A stark end.
So, coming back to the why, what made her do it? This psychological landscape?
Well, fundamentally, it seems to boil down to that pathological lack of empathy we talked about, a total emotional disconnect. Seeing infants purely as obstacles, or worse, as income sources to be disposed of once payment was received.
Greed as the engine, and murder as just the tool.
A disturbingly pragmatic approach to evil, you could say. Profit over absolutely everything else.
And her ability to deceive, to manipulate these incredibly vulnerable women, it's just staggering. The betrayal of trust.
Absolutely. And maybe there was an escalation, starting with neglect, perhaps becoming desensitized over time, until active murder felt like the more efficient, maybe even cleaner solution in her twisted logic.
Can we speculate about specific psychological factors like narcissism or anything like that?
We have to be careful diagnosing across time, of course. But speculatively, you could see traits perhaps aligned with narcissism, this belief she could outsmart everyone, perhaps. A lack of impulse control specifically regarding the greed aspect. Maybe personal hardships hardened her, but they don't explain the specific targeting of babies.
You mentioned the dark triad earlier in our prep. Psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism. Does that framework maybe offer some lens here?
It's a modern concept, but yeah, you can see elements, can't you? The lack of empathy aligns with psychopathy, the potential grandiosity or belief in her own cleverness with narcissism, and the constant manipulation, the cynical view of others to be exploited, that fits with Machiavellianism. It might offer a way to conceptualize that consistent pattern of manipulation and disregard for morality.
So it wasn't about some deep, complex trauma driving her necessarily. It was maybe more mundane in a truly horrifying way. Profit.
Profit, combined with what seems like a void where human connection and empathy should be. She was definitely a product of her time exploiting the societal failures.
But also a predator acting within it. A terrifying combination.
Her story is just profoundly disturbing. The sheer scale, potentially hundreds of victims. It's a stark reminder of human cruelty.
And we can't forget the mothers. They were victims too. Victims of Dyer, yes, but also victims of a society that left them so vulnerable.
Definitely. Dyer turned care into this cold, deadly business. It's just chilling to think about.
Thankfully, her case did lead to some changes, right? Legal reforms to try and protect infants better.
Yes, it exposed huge flaws in the system and prompted efforts to regulate adoption and foster care more closely. Baby farming itself came under much greater scrutiny.
It really makes you think, though, about the societal conditions that allow such things to happen. And, are there modern parallels? Different kinds of vulnerabilities, perhaps, that are exploited today?
That's the lingering question, isn't it? What does a case like Amelia Dyer's tell us about the darker side of human nature? And ultimately, how much do we truly value our most defenseless members? Something to really ponder.